You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Good evening, 8 PM in Mauritius, 4 PM here in the UK at Force 13 HQ. We are monitoring Cyclone Cilida, which is continuing on its intensification phase. As we watch the satellite imagery, you can see where it's going, and gradual movement towards the south. Just off shot there at the very bottom of the screen now is Mauritius, which looks to be affected by some parts of the outer edges of the storm arriving at this moment in time, with some significant rainfall by the looks of things depicted by satellite. If you've got any observations on the ground for us during this hour that we're here for tonight, please send us a message, and start your message if you've got any questions or comments for us as well, with Force 13 on the chat feature of the YouTube stream right now. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm here with you for the hour, and we're going to be taking questions, and we're going to be assessing what the situation is right now. And I have to say, it's probably a worse case scenario than a lot of us would have expected by this stage. What I can tell you is that as you look at that latest imagery there, it is moving pretty much due south now. There's very little left of the westward element that's steering it further and further towards the left-hand side, and that's obviously bad news for Mauritius if it does continue to move in that vein. But it is appearing to curve now towards a southward trajectory, and if it does bend off to the southeast as we would expect, then that would mean now that Mauritius should be spared the worst of the storm. Now, that still doesn't mean that Mauritius is safe. Class 2 warnings are in effect. Tropical storm force winds are likely on the island, with hurricane force winds possible on the island. Looking at rainfall amounts, expectations, still very much what they were in yesterday's stream. We're expecting anywhere from 200 to 600 millimeters of rain to fall over Mauritius in the next, well, during the duration of the storm between now and Monday. Looking at the storm as it is at this very moment in time, there it is on the screen, hard to miss, 341 miles from the capital, Port Louis. Let's just take a look at some infrared imagery here. Here is some infrared imagery. Recent frames. This part of the world is a little bit slow on the satellite imagery, so we've only got hourly images there, but you can see how the storm has been developing. Some people suggesting it's very close to Category 5. Interesting to see the Joint Typhoon Warning Center going with 155 miles per hour, which I was really surprised to see. A little bit high in my opinion. Force 13's estimate 145 miles an hour. Now, to put that into perspective, that's about 230 kilometers per hour. That's sustained winds inside the storm right now, with higher gusts probably exceeding Category 5 intensity. Réunion are yet to recognize it at this time, but according to our estimates, it is a very intense tropical cyclone, the highest category on the local scale. Its eye temperature earlier today was 10 degrees above freezing, which usually denotes a very strong storm. That kind of temperature is usually consistent with what you would see on a borderline Category 4, Category 5. And you can see the cloud tops all around the storm, wrapping around it. You thought it looked good yesterday, it looks much, much better today. So that's pretty much everything on the appearance of the storm. Let's see what we've got elsewhere on our screen here. Well, there's Invest 95W. That is also going on in the world right now, but I just wanted to bring about some graphics to show you what's going on elsewhere. Invest 95B as well off the coast of Sri Lanka. and what's left of Cyclone Owen still going as well, remarkably, off the coast of Australia. Now, these are some computer models from earlier showing what they all think side by side on Cilida. Well, it disappeared off the screen. We've got to go and fetch that again. Here it is. A little bit out of date now. It's what was shown on our earlier update today, but you can see what the models were saying. GFS was very tame. It's far exceeded the GFS's expectations, and indeed pretty much every other computer model apart from the CTCX, although even it was behind on the timing of when this storm would reach its intensity, and of course more strengthening is still possible. It's baffling looking at that wind shear chart on the top right hand pane. I don't know how two models could disagree so wildly. I've never seen that before, but I'm more inclined to agree with the GFS that wind shear is low, and that is the main reason why this storm has intensified so much in the last 24 hours. Wind shear is not expected to rise until the end of the weekend, really. Saturday evening, Sunday is when we expect wind shear to rise. Wind shear tears apart storms. Wind shear is good for those who value their property on Mauritius because it will weaken the storm. Sea surface temperatures are still running pretty high, around 27 degrees Celsius, good model agreement on that, and relative humidity is also fairly good. The track forecast is probably the most interesting part of this screen, because the models vary quite differently. In fact, the JTWC have it further east than any of those models. The HWRF is the furthest west. That is quite often depicting the worst case scenario from what we've been seeing in the last few days. That is the one that says hurricane conditions will be just about on the coast of Mauritius. But the other models, I must stress, say that the hurricane conditions will remain offshore. It really depends on exactly how far west this storm goes before it starts to make that southeastward turn. It still hasn't done it yet, but it is now starting to move pretty much due south, and I expect that eastward element will start to come in later tonight. Let's see what else we've got here. This is a visual look at the GFS model. That is what the GFS had there. So you can see, according to GFS, tropical storm force winds just about on the coast of northeastern Mauritius. The hurricane force winds in the yellows and the oranges still quite a way off the island. And Rodrigues there on the eastern side, for those who are concerned, looks to be quite far away from the main features, but it could still get tropical storm force winds given that the eastern wind field is going to be larger than the western wind field, as is typical for storms in this part of the world. The HWRF model had something different on its mind, though. You can see there quite different. The yellow zone, the hurricane force wind zone, just about on the coast of the northeastern tip of Mauritius here. I'm just trying to get a date stamp on that. I'm not entirely sure. That must have been by Saturday night or something thereabouts. But tropical storm force winds covering the whole island of Mauritius in that scenario. You can see quite clearly how much of a worse scenario it is if it goes with the HWRF rather than the GFS, because tropical storm force winds are only felt on maybe 5% of the island on the GFS, and with the HWRF it's about 95%. So that is a big difference in only about 20 miles of deviation in the track. 30 kilometers. It can make all the difference in a storm like this, especially with the intensity that it's appearing to show. Here's another look on the HWRF output. That's for Sunday at 4 AM Mauritius time. So you can see Mauritius on the left hand side there. This is simulated radar imagery. It's not showing anything in concrete. And again, you can see significant rainfall occurring over the island in probably squally bursts after the main course of the storm has passed through. So none of the models are calling for a landfall, which is good news, and I really don't think a landfall is a realistic idea. It's looking pretty unlikely that Mauritius is going to get what would be considered to be a direct hit. Now, a direct hit, by our estimations, is when the eye wall of the storm, or even the edge of the eye, passes over the landmass, but not the center of the eye, which is what would be called a landfall. So a direct hit is pretty much just as bad as what a landfall would be. We're not expecting that either. We're expecting a sort of an indirect hit by the edge of the main part of the storm, but certainly not the worst part. And as we've seen on the HWRF model there, worst case scenario would appear to be hurricane conditions on the eastern tip of the island. There's another look at that HWRF model run. Its peak intensity is expecting only 140 miles per hour. Well, the storm's already beaten that, so that model run is out of the window really, because it's already stronger than what the HWRF depicted. So that's why we have to be more cautious, because the model runs that we're looking at are assuming that the storm is going to be weaker than it actually might be when it does arrive. That is something we need to bear in mind as well. Here's another look. This is the rainfall forecast, which might be of more interest. The maximum rainfall there is 24 inches. That's almost 600 millimeters of rain. That is mainly around the storm where it is right now, because it's moving pretty slowly. And that is the automated streaming thing kicking in again and taking my view away. Let's go back to it. So it looks like it's under the yellow zones there, Mauritius itself, and that would correspond to 8 to 16 inches of rain. So we're looking 200 to 300 millimeters, but in some isolated spots it could go a lot higher than that. It has gone much higher than what the models have predicted in the past. So 200 to 600 millimeters of rain possible, probably closer to the lower number along the coast and in populated areas. That we don't need to look at, because the Atlantic is dead, of course, and so is the Pacific. Here's a look on the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, showing those two systems that are still active. You can just about see them there in the southwest Indian Ocean. They're the only two storms that are active in the world right now. Kenanga weakening quite a lot, down to tropical storm status, 70 miles per hour. That is about 115 kilometers per hour. And is going to be it's going to be dying off as it moves slowly towards the west. These are chances of tropical storm conditions, so this might show it in very simple terms, but quite effective terms, I suppose, in chances of tropical storm conditions. So drawn out there is the cone of uncertainty. Don't pay any attention to the central line, but it is a guide as to where the center might go, but it could go anywhere within the cone, the outer boundaries there. The center of the storm could pass anywhere between there. 75% chance of tropical storm conditions in Port Louis, 70% in the southern part of Mauritius. Chances quite low elsewhere, but still 20% in Rodrigues. That's the Western Pacific. There's a very recent image from the US Navy showing the storm looking very good indeed. The red circle around the center of the storm there, that's depicting a pretty strong eye wall. That's usually consistent with over 140 miles per hour. So that's one of the reasons why we've gone with 145 on our update at the minute. But it looks to me as though the storm is still strengthening, and that of course is bad news. Here's a wide shot again of the southwest Indian Ocean, those two storms there. You see just how far away Kenanga actually is still. It's not going to have an effect on Cilida. Enough said about that, I think. Let's go back to the latest satellite imagery as soon as I can get it up on the screen here, which will show us in the quickest imagery that we've got at the minute, showing what's going on right now. This, if you haven't seen this imagery before, we've shown it on several of our streams in the past, and we also showed it during Cyclone Cilida regularly. It's the same imagery as that. Just a reminder of what it all means. So this is satellite estimated rainfall rates. Now, they're not necessarily accurate because it's going by satellite estimates. It's not actually going from ground observations. So the green areas there, in all of those green areas around the center of the storm, the light green, that's 5 millimeters per hour of rain estimated to be falling under that color. It then goes to dark green, which is around 10 millimeters per hour. Then it goes into yellow, 15 millimeters per hour. Then it goes to orange, 20 millimeters per hour. Then it goes to a sort of orangey red color. I'm not quite sure what that color is before pink, But when you get to pink, that is about 30 millimeters per hour. And then after that, it goes to solid red, which you only see near the center of the storm there. That's 40 millimeters per hour. And the purple, which is 50, which you probably won't be seeing very much on land. Over in Mauritius, though, we have had some significant rain falling over the area in the last 2 or 3 hours. According to the satellites there, rainfall rates possibly up to 20 millimeters per hour there, and that amount of rain may have fallen in some areas. If you've got any reports on the ground for us, please get in touch. Start your message with Force 13, and now I'm going to take some questions if we've got any. Let's see. In fact, I don't think we do have any, so I'll keep waiting there for those questions to come in, and I'll do my best to answer them, of course. So the center of the storm is still 341 miles from Mauritius. That is somewhere near 600 kilometers, a little bit less than that. I'm led to believe about 500 to 550. I'm not quite sure on that. But those numbers, of course, are ticking down. In the last 24 hours, I think it's gone down 300 kilometers. I think it's drawn nearer by that much. What you will probably see over the next few days is acceleration of the storm. Let's now take a look at the Météo France track. I think this is that's not the latest anymore, I don't think. Here is the latest now, showing an old image from earlier. So the black cyclone symbol there, for those who don't know, depicts the highest cyclone intensity in the local scale, which is very intense tropical cyclone. They don't think it's reached that intensity yet, but we do, and so does the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. So it is, again, another battle between agencies as to who is the most believable. But looking at the satellite imagery, as you've just seen with us here, it's very impressive. Réunion don't think that the storm's going to get that close to Mauritius, and it may indeed not. It's mainly following the line of the GFS model there by the looks of things, but if the HWRF model does appear to be right, then it will track very close to Mauritius, probably along the very edge of that cone on the left-hand side. I'm just curious to see if we could possibly get the JTWC graphic up. I don't think we can. That's a shame. We're not able to show the JTWC graphic at this time, but there is the Météo France graphic at least, showing you what the latest is. Let's see if we've now got some RAM imagery of the storm. Well, that was looking at the whole life of Cilida. So that's how it began, and then it rapidly intensified in the last few days. And you can see, let's see if we can get to right now. That is the latest image, which was just over an hour ago, which is quite a long time by our standards. You can see there maybe a little bit of flakiness going on inside the eye, and just a slight wobble to the east in that latest frame. It looked very good earlier on today, but it is a little bit off that now. So I think we're about right in saying 145 miles an hour on our analysis. If you've got any questions for us whilst we're on the air, please send them in, and we're live for the hour. We're probably also going to be here again first thing tomorrow morning at 6 AM Mauritius time. We're either going to be doing a normal update or we'll be going live. I'm not sure on that yet. I believe Max has joined us. Now, we had some difficulties yesterday trying to get him on the air as well, so I'm not sure if we've got any issues today. Nope, can't get him at this time. I thought he was there. Back to some more imagery. Let's see if we can take a look at some visible imagery from today then, as we look back. There is what the storm looked like earlier on. The eye quite visible, but not particularly deep as you would see on the visible imagery there. Alright, so there is a question there. The chances of it becoming a Category 5 storm. I would say the chances are significant, especially if it gets its act together in the next 24 hours. It's got about 24, 36 hours to make the most of the good conditions that it's got. Wind shear is going to rise when it gets close to Mauritius. So that's pretty much how much time it's got. Hello? I heard some interference there. Let's see here. Some comments there. In Mauritius, it's been raining quite a lot, but mostly showers. It does look very showery in nature. And that is going to continue really for the foreseeable until the winds really get up. Do you reckon there'll be an eye-wall replacement cycle? Well, that may be the issue right now. It probably is an eye-wall replacement cycle starting to take place inside the storm. It looks that way, can't confirm it yet, but that would appear to be my best guess. Lots of other discussion going on in the comments right now regarding Atlantic hurricanes, but I don't think we've got much to say about that right now. But it has been a pretty quickly intensifying storm in the last few days. It already had one eye-wall replacement cycle, and of course if this is another one, it's basically a restructuring of the eye wall around the eye, basically. An eye wall needs to be complete for a storm to be able to intensify significantly and to maintain a very strong intensity like what we're seeing at the moment, category 4/5. Hello?
Hello?
We finally got you. How are you today, Max?
I'm good.
We were speaking briefly yesterday. We usually have a much larger team than this, by the way, but a lot of them are over in the United States and, well, still pretty early in the morning over there, not so much here. So what brings you here, and what are your thoughts on Cilida this morning?
Well, it's definitely far stronger than I expected it to be at this point in time.
Yeah, indeed, it's stronger than every model and agency expected by now. Let's now see if we can take a look at some water vapor imagery as well. It is riding a fine line with that dry air swathe to the west of the storm, although it is appearing to close in a little bit. Reunion today probably had a very nice day looking at it because it is just outside of the storm's influence. Now you may remember us speaking last night about, well, Mauritius was pretty much in the same spot as Reunion is right now last night. And I did say that the moisture would arrive very soon. I'm not sure if it did arrive on time, but it's definitely there now, and you can see the difference between the two islands in the conditions that are going to be felt there now. Reunion will probably feel that moisture plume very soon too. Maybe give it another, what would that be, possibly 3 to 6 hours before it arrives on the eastern coast of Reunion. But the gulf is quite astounding there as you see the difference between the two islands and the storm approaching. But you can see the main part of the storm still very far away, but it is drawing nearer and it can move in quite quickly. If you haven't started preparing for the storm yet, then you're a little bit late because time is running out. Tomorrow really is the last opportunity you will have before the storm force winds start to occur, we expect on Saturday night or into the early hours of Sunday. So of course we'll have extensive coverage on Saturday, and as long as we need to, of course, as we go on. Some questions coming in there. What is the deadliest hurricane of 2018? Having not looked at the information yet, I'm not sure I can say. But Force 13 will be releasing its end-of-year cyclone report, probably in the first week of January. So look out for that, those who are interested in reading the report and finding out all the information.
Speaking of which, are we ever going to fix the links to the other ones?
That might be a priority by the time we get there.
And I've also been seeing quite a bit of talk in the chat of the probability of Cilida becoming a Cat 5.
It's a distinct probability. I thought it might have been getting close earlier today, and the JTWC certainly thought so when they put it at 155 miles an hour, which I think was, personally, I think that was nonsense, but...
Yeah, well, that's the JTWC for you.
Well, what can we say? I can't disparage JTWC on air for all the good work that they do. But I don't think they've got this one right, at least not at the moment. But then Mateo France are usually the opposite. They often go a little bit too low, and I think they are lowballing this one as well.
Like the JMA.
Yes, the other agency over in Japan. They're not covering this storm though. But yeah, we're pretty much in the middle of what the two agencies are saying right now. We're saying 145 miles an hour. That's roughly 230 kilometers per hour. Sustained winds, that is. And obviously gusts would be potentially much higher than that. So it was 341 miles from Port Louis. Let's see if we can do a new estimate now based on that latest image, which I must say looks quite good. Let's see here, 15.34 south and 57.65 east roughly. So plugging the numbers in myself, you can do it along with us as well at home or wherever you are, and see if we can find out. The distance hasn't changed very much since we started the show. It's now 332 miles. In kilometers, that's 534 kilometers from Port Louis right now. From the closest point on Mauritius, the northernmost tip of the island, that is about 513 kilometers. Just to put that into some perspective there. And that there is the latest imagery.
What is its size in diameter?
It depends on what your estimate is and how you go by that estimate. If you're talking about the wind field has become much larger since yesterday. Something like, let's see, probably about 200 kilometers in all directions by now. So the diameter there would therefore be about 400 kilometers in terms of the tropical storm force winds. So you could be talking theoretically about the storm winds only being 113 kilometers away from Mauritius. Probably not, because it is very speculative. Probably got a little bit more time than that, but not very much. The hurricane force wind field extends out 35 nautical miles, and that is roughly 65 kilometers in all directions. So the hurricane wind field diameter, therefore, is about 130 kilometers. So that is still very far away from Mauritius itself. But as you can see, it's continuing to draw closer. I'm still not seeing a prolonged eastward element yet. Just looks like a jog at the minute, and I would put its motion at southwards.
I'm also seeing quite a few people saying it's raining pretty hard in Mauritius.
Yes, well, we can see there some significant rain move through at 2:45 my time, which would be 6:45 in Mauritius. Looks like there was some significant rain going through at that time. Now this, of course, isn't completely up to date. The last image on this sequence is 12 minutes ago, and it did show some significant rainfall on the southwestern part of the island, and there's more on the way. As you can see on this imagery here, there's another little splodge that's just about to reach the northwestern coast of Mauritius, and I think I've just broken this tool. Oh, we got it. So you can see on a close-up here, looking at the outline of Mauritius, significant rain moved through not so long ago. Another band looks to be moving through in maybe an hour's time. Or maybe sooner, actually, looking at how it progressed there in those latest frames. Probably around half an hour's time, some more significant rain moving in from the northeast. These are
This
just
guy's
spin-off, not spin-off things, but you know, residual parts of the storm. The main part of the storm is still a little bit off yet.
this guy has been quite persistent with his question. Has a hurricane hit Greenland? Not well, still tropical. I'll say that.
Well, there you go. Hurricanes and ice don't mix very well.
Yeah.
I think that's enough
when will
said.
the 2018 typhoon season be released?
Okay, so we're getting a lot more off-topic questions. I don't mind answering them as long as we're not stealing the show away from actually covering the storm. The Pacific typhoon season animation will be released probably in the first week of January, but might be sooner if you're lucky. Last year it was the first week of January, so we're just going off that schedule. What else do we have? Nothing else in particular at this moment in time. Just a reminder, Class 2 warnings are in effect in Mauritius as it stands. I'm not sure if there's been any updates on that. I'm just going to see if I can check for myself here. But no, Class 2 warnings in effect. I'm just reminding myself of the warning system in Mauritius. I know it goes up to 4, but Class 2 warnings are issued to allow, as far as practicable they say, but I think it should be practical, 12 hours of daylight before the occurrence of gusts of 120 kilometers per hour, and I think that's pretty sensible. Class 3 warnings are issued so as to allow, as far as practicable, 6 hours of daylight before the occurrence of gusts of 120 kilometers per hour. No doubt that will be issued first thing in the morning. And Class 4 is issued when those gusts have been recorded and expected to continue. An interesting warning system they've got, because most warning systems go by sustained winds rather than wind gusts. But Class 2 warnings in effect, and yeah, they'll probably make their decision at 4 AM when they do their next update from the Mauritius Meteorological Service. There again is another recent image. That image is self-updating of Cilida from the US Navy. You can see some very significant cloud tops to the northern edge there, but in general, I don't know about an eyewall replacement cycle now. Might still be holding itself together. It's still looking pretty decent on the Navy imagery, but it does overestimate storms sometimes on that imagery. So I'm a little cautious and skeptical on that one.
By your estimates, what is the max sustained wind that we can get as it passes near Mauritius on its trajectory?
Well, I sort of speculated about that earlier on. If we were looking at
That is very speculative.
the HWRF model is the worst case scenario out of the models, and they're saying hurricane force winds, sustained winds on northeastern tip of Mauritius. But
projection.
huh?
Hasn't the storm already beaten the HWRF's intensity projection?
Well, it's beating the intensity projection, yes, but the intensity, a more intense storm is more likely to recurve more quickly in this instance. So it's likely to bend off towards the east, but if it does defy those models and moves directly to the south, and we're calling for the worst case scenario that's even beyond the models, then you could be looking at anything. You could be looking at 200 kilometer per hour sustained winds and greater if the storm was to make a direct hit on the island, which at the moment is not being predicted by any model, and is not being predicted by us, and is not being predicted by any service. But given how fine the margins are, it still cannot be completely ruled out, can it? Again, this is a near real-time look at Cyclone Cilida. The last image on this was nearly 20 minutes ago now. There should be a new image appearing anytime. Still moving, pretty much due south. Mauritius getting quite a bit of rain at the moment. The rainfall not quite reaching Réunion yet, but they may get some little bits here and there in the next few hours or overnight tonight. There's a big band that's moving south there that may go on to affect Mauritius, but the large part of it appears to be off to the east. Rodrigues may also get some significant rainfall soon as well in the next 2 or 3 hours by the looks of that imagery there. If you can't make out the island there, it's pretty small, I know. It's just on the very near to the edge of the image on the right hand side, not too far from that rain band, the southern band from the storm. The storm itself still very far away. The hurricane force winds, as guidance, it's not, I'm not saying to use this as a rule of thumb, but just the guidance really, it's probably roughly within the green circle is where the hurricane force winds are occurring. But this isn't measuring wind, this particular imagery, this is measuring estimated rainfall depicted from the satellite estimates. We had some... Do you have a question there? Strat is posting on Force 13's behalf again. That is surely going to lead to trouble, but if not, then well done, Strat. The 2018 Pacific Hurricane Season animation is premiering tonight at 6 PM US East Coast time, 3 PM Pacific time. We can take a look back at 2018 in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And the next update on this storm will be at 6 AM tomorrow after we've finished here live. In fact, no, I think we've got another one coming up a little bit later on. We'll probably have another storm update at 11 PM Mauritius time, a quick one just on our channel, just to give you the very latest on this storm, because of course it is getting pretty close and we're trying to get out as many updates as we can. But there really isn't much else to say from us right now, because we're watching it just as much as everyone else is. But those Signal 2 warnings in effect for Mauritius and Class 2 warnings. You know, Signal 2 and Class 2 are very similar. Signal 2 warnings are usually used in the Philippines, but they mean the same thing, really. In Réunion, a pre-cyclone alert. And that remains in force at this moment. I would have liked to find out a little bit more about the rainfall estimates, but given how small Mauritius is, really, it's quite difficult to give you rainfall estimates by district, because you know, it's pretty unpredictable. So I can only stick with the line that I've been using so far, which is anywhere from 200 millimeters to isolated amounts of 600 millimeters in the storm. In Mauritius when the storm passes through its life. So that's literally where we are right now. Any thoughts for us, Max?
Don't really think there's much more I can add on at the moment.
Okay. Earlier today, the eye temperature of the storm reached 10 degrees above freezing. Let's just check that latest image. Wow, it's actually really looking good on that latest image, I must say. That's a new infrared image of the storm that's come in not so long ago. The center, let's see if we can get the eye temperature on that. You may wonder why it's so important to get the temperature of the eye. It is one of the parameters required in discerning the actual intensity of the storm. Just home in on this and see if we can, just to be sure that I got the right number there. So 4 degrees Celsius is the maximum temperature inside the eye. Cloud top temperatures, the weakest point of the eye wall there on the eastern side, that's minus 73 Celsius. And the highest, the worst part of the cloud tops there in the southwestern side, minus 81 Celsius. Might sound like gobbledygook to a lot of people, but in layman's terms, that means that It's on for mid to high range category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, which corresponds to the highest category on the local scale, very intense tropical cyclone. And that is going to continue for some time. We expect for maybe 48 hours it will keep that intensity, and maybe beyond. I'll be very interested to see at the next update from Meteo France whether they are also going with the highest category on their scale. Their next update, I assume, won't be until 4 in the morning. Oh no, we've not got to 10 o'clock yet, have we? The 10 p.m. update must be on its way pretty soon. That'll be in just over an hour and 20 minutes or so. We won't be here for that, I'm afraid, but an hour after that we will have the latest update on the storm. The estimated pressure, according to us, is around 935 millibars. JTWC have gone quite a bit lower at 925 millibars. There's no actual observational data and evidence on that. It's just based off satellite estimates from us and from the other authorities. But it really is a guessing game when it comes to storm intensity, when there aren't direct observations involved. Alright, let's see if we've got anything else right now. When will it... Oh no, well yes, when do we think it will deviate to the southeastward movement? That is probably the most important question right now, and unfortunately it's the most difficult question. We're looking at the latest imagery there. This is just about as fluid as we can get it. You can see a jog to the west at first there, and then a jog back to the east. So if you even it out, it's pretty much southward moving at the minute. The southeastward motion could start right now. We've got no way of knowing until it actually happens. Logic would suggest that it will start very soon, and that would mean that the storm will probably pass quite a distance away from Mauritius, but it could stay going south for quite a while yet. And if that does occur, then it's making a beeline for Mauritius the longer that it makes a direct movement towards the south. My hunch is that it's going to move off to the east considerably enough to avoid hurricane conditions on the island, but that might not be true, and only time will tell. But that is my best guess at the minute. It's a forecast, it's not a high confidence forecast, but that is the best forecast we have right now. Storm conditions are likely to still be felt on Mauritius no matter what, and if the storm intensifies further, and if there's an IWOL replacement cycle, by the way, that will expand the wind field, so that could also change things too. So certainly can't be written off for hurricane conditions on Mauritius at all, but tropical storm conditions are pretty much certain, at least somewhere on the island, and that's why everyone needs to be preparing accordingly for those conditions to occur. Let's see. Okay, so I was a little confused earlier. Just to reiterate the schedule for tonight. The current time is getting towards 8:45 in Mauritius. Meteo France will be doing one of their own updates at 10 p.m. And then we will be doing another update on the Force 13 channel at 11. A very short 4-minute update, the usual ones that we do. And then we will be going live again tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. We think we're going live. We'll certainly have an update of some sort at 6 a.m. as we have been doing for several days now. And we may have rolling coverage throughout Saturday, depending on what exactly the situation is. So I hope that is fully clear now. Alright, some comments here. The rain is the problem in Mauritius, as most homes are concrete blocks now. The drainage channels are basically the same as 50 years ago when the population of the island was lower. And that is one of the biggest concerns, isn't it, when we're talking about rainfall amounts possibly up to 600 millimeters in some places. Isolated places I would expect, but widespread we could be seeing 200 millimeters of rain or higher, and judging by those satellite estimates it would appear that maybe 50 millimeters of rain has already fallen in some areas so far. I ought to check up with Mauritius to find out whether they've got any observations of their own on that, but maybe some people could do it for us in the chat. Which basins are still active this late in December? Just the question that I saw there. Well, of course, December is when the southern hemisphere starts to warm up, although sometimes it depends on the prevailing climatic conditions. For instance, we're in a mild El Nino at the minute, which favours activity in the western Pacific in December, and the Indian Ocean and North Indian Ocean has not been slumbering at all this year. A lot of storms there this year, and another invest up there right now, 95B, which is in between India and Sri Lanka. That one could also potentially form. It's been a year where every basin has been active. I think all of them are going to end up being above average, and that's why we are just 3 storms away from the annual record for tropical storms. Nameable storms, that would be. What countries does this cyclone affect? Well, just Mauritius really, and of course Réunion, which is I'm not sure if it's still actually a part of France, or whether it's administrative division, or whether it's sort of semi-independent place, but it's one of those things, much like a lot of those British territories as well in the Caribbean and in the Atlantic. But those are the only 2 places that this storm is going to affect at any point during its life. It's not going to veer off to the west towards Madagascar. Only these areas are at risk. So there's only 2 places that we are looking at, really. Our latest estimate for the storm, 145 miles per hour and about 340 miles from Mauritius. From the closest point of Mauritius, actually, the latest information in kilometers, 513. That number going down all the time. A comment just came in there. Currently raining moderately on the western side of the island, not too windy. That is to be expected. It's not expected to be particularly windy yet. That will probably occur during the course of tomorrow, but there will be some sharp showers that are occurring over Mauritius tonight. Those will continue. They may get a little bit heavier as well, depending on what exactly happens. Réunion may get the odd 1 or 2, but probably not very much. At least not for today. Looks like we're going to spend Christmas with Cilida this year in Mauritius. Well, might have to be dealing with the aftermath over Christmas if it is bad enough, but it should be cleared away by Sunday, or at the very latest by Monday morning. So
yeah, I don't really think it's going to be much of a Tracy or a Knock 10.
It shouldn't kill off Christmas, but it may interfere with plans for anyone trying to get to Mauritius for Christmas holidays or whatever, or people coming home for Christmas in Mauritius. It could have big problems with flight travel, especially if people are leaving it last minute. So that is something that will, of course, be a big issue for many families. Let's see what else we have. Will Cilida become a Category 5?
Speculative.
We're still talking about it. It's not too far away from that status. It could do it later on tonight. My guess is... I really don't know what to think, actually. It's got a decent chance of doing it. It really does. If it starts an eye wall replacement cycle now, it really depends on what happens to it, but putting it in this way, it's got about 24 hours to do so. And that's quite a long time when we look at it. In the way it's been intensifying so far, I really wouldn't be surprised if it did get to Category 5 status.
Yeah, but if it starts, if you said if it starts an eye wall replacement cycle right now, I don't think it'll have enough time to reach Cat 5 afterwards.
It depends. If it has a botched eye wall replacement cycle, then it's got no chance. But you know, it's almost like Begita, really, isn't it? And I just want to make something clear comparing this to Begita. Begita was a very strong Category 3 storm at one point, and it ended up weakening massively before arriving in Mauritius. This storm is not like Begita. First of all, it's already much stronger, and secondly, it's in a better environment than Begita was, and I really don't think it's going to weaken as quickly as Begita did. Even if it did, it would still be a Category 2 when it passes Mauritius, and I don't think that would change the state of where we are right now very much at all. So,
and if it does have an eyewall replacement cycle, I don't expect it'll even come close to doing something like Patricia or Katrina.
Whoa there, whoa there.
Yeah.
Let's not mention that.
Yeah. Sorry, I may have just erupted a bunch of hype in the chat.
No, certainly not. So people are wondering what an eyewall replacement cycle is. Well, the storm, to maintain the eye, obviously there needs to be a strong eye wall, which is the banding that you see around the very center of the storm there around the eye. You'll probably notice it better on the or actually you'll notice it better on this particular imagery. You see quite clearly there, those yellows and oranges and reds is the strength of the eye wall. An eye wall replacement cycle usually occurs when the eye shrinks, or the eye wall just collapses, or a new eye wall forms around the old one and eventually replaces it. Now sometimes that can take a day or two. Looking at the Western Pacific storms this year, some of them took many days to complete one, like MUT for instance, after it struck the Mariana Islands. So an eye wall replacement cycle in real terms temporarily weakens the storm, but could make it stronger later on if it completes the eye wall replacement cycle properly. If not, it could be putting the storm out of action for the foreseeable. No indications. I was speculating on it earlier that it might have been occurring, but looking at that latest image, it doesn't look like there's one going on right now, so we'll just put that out of the way for the time being. Let's see. What do we have here? If the cyclone directly hits Mauritius, what would the expected gusts be? Well, we're not expecting the storm to directly hit Mauritius, but if it did, the wind gusts would probably be up to or increasing above 300 kilometers per hour. Sustained winds will probably be near 250 kilometers per hour. But I don't believe any of that is going to happen. I believe that we will probably get close to 120 kilometers per hour sustained winds on the eastern tip of Mauritius, with higher gusts possibly up to 160, 180 kilometers per hour along the eastern coast in exposed locations. Most areas will probably only receive tropical storm force winds. Some of them may get hurricane force gusts, which is what usually triggers Mauritius to issue class 4 warnings. So I think it would be wise, well, not saying it would be wise, I think my prediction is that class 4 warnings will go into effect at some point during the passage of this storm, and probably only briefly. On Saturday night or early on Sunday morning. Saying it as I see it at the minute. Let's see here. Last time it was Fantala, and this time it's Cilida. Do you think intense tropical cyclone activity is going to be more frequent in this region? Well, there's a lot of intense cyclones that have happened in this basin. A lot of them happened in the earlier part of the 2000s decade as well. It was a very active period for this region, and the late 90s, more over Australia in the late 90s. It could well be another active phase in the Southwest Indian Ocean, because things have been pretty quiet in recent years, so that is something to take on board. But it's got all the makings this year of an active season, considering that we're already talking about the C name, which really should have been the D name, because we had that other system in, I think, September 1S, which happened much earlier in the year, a very early season storm. So this really is the 4th tropical cyclone in the region. And actually it's more than that, isn't it? It's the 5th, because Kenanga is a name borrowed from the Indonesian area. So it is actually the 5th cyclone in the region, and we're not even at the new year yet. So Let's just see, we could actually pop over and take a look at Kananga for those who are interested. Just before we finish up here, we're here for another 5 minutes if you want to send in your questions quickly. Just to remind everyone, we will be doing another update on the Force 13 channel at 11 PM Mauritius time. We will also be back with more coverage starting at 6 AM tomorrow morning, and we don't know exactly what our plans are going to be just yet. But we are going to be around at 6 AM, so watch this space for more. Imagery appears to be very glitchy here, but from what you could see just there briefly of Kananga, there's very little left of it. It's really dying a death at this time, and Cilida looking far, far better. How far to the east of Mauritius do you think Cilida will pass? Well, if you take the GFS model, the GFS thinks it will be somewhere in the region of 200 kilometers, maybe 300. If you take the HWRF, it's going to be more like 100. So it's going to be a pretty close call. None of the models are further west than the HWRF, so no models are actually predicting the storm to move within 100 kilometers of Mauritius. But given that the hurricane force wind field now extends out 65 kilometers, it's really a very small margin of error that we're talking about here, and that's why we're concerned about this, because this is a very easy forecast to get wrong one way or the other, either overhyping it too much or downplaying it too much, and obviously it being worse than what they're saying. So it's a very tricky one that we've got on our hands at this time, but we're doing our best at least. Let's see. What else do we have here? A question there relating to whether the southeastward movement doesn't materialize as much as they're expecting. That is another possibility. I doubt it given the strength of the storm. But you know, I can only report on what's going on right now. It is still moving south. It has not got any eastward component in its movement yet. Let's just check those latest images, see if there's any change that we can decipher. It doesn't look like. Just following it there. In fact, it looks to be moving very little in those last few frames. Not saying it's stalling, it's probably something very temporary. The last image of that sequence is from 10 minutes ago, showing the storm looking pretty good, and it would appear no sign of an eyewall replacement cycle. Max, any final comments? We're about to finish up here.
Well, regardless of where this system does end up going, I mean, anyone on Mauritius needs to be taking it very seriously and making the appropriate preparations. And definitely stay tuned to your local warning centers and agencies, and if you can, stay tuned for more updates and live events on this storm here at Force 13.
Let's just see if we can get another latest image from RAM here just before we finish up. That last image is from 3 UTC, so that image is not very up to date. So we'll stick with what we've got here. The Navy site's gone down as well, so we've been hit on two fronts there, but this is probably the best imagery we've got right now. See some infrared there. Now the cloud tops aren't quite what they were earlier, but they are a bit more uniform and a little bit more organized, so I would say the storm is at least maintaining its intensity and quite possibly more strengthening on the way. In any case, that's us finished for this hour. We're going to be back again, as stated, 11 PM in Mauritius is when we're going to have a quick update on the Force 13 channel. It will also be put out on Facebook as well. And we will be back again in some capacity at 6 AM Mauritius time on Saturday morning with more coverage on the storm. In the meantime, you can get in touch with us through any of our social mediums on Facebook and Twitter. Search Force 13 all in text. And you can also add Force 13 on Skype and my personal account on Discord, Fool13, at extension 9094. For all of those links and the link to our Discord server as well, take a look at the description right underneath our video at this time. You'll find the latest, you'll find the links. You'll find the links to those locations, just in case you wanted to get in touch in the interim. That's all for now. If anything changes, we'll cut in with any breaking news, but I don't think much is going to change over the course of tonight. Next update in 2 hours, and have a good night over there. Hope the preparations are going well. We'll need to be vigilant for tomorrow, and it's probably going to be a very long weekend. Thanks for watching. Good night.